So now, assuming the task force meant something similar when they recommended encouraging both more sustainable growing practices and like allowing outdoor production, for example, how ready do you think various levels of government are ready to engage in this, let alone implement anything like this?
They're definitely engaging. So I can say that I've had great conversations with Health Canada that they do reach out, and they're asking the real questions now to not just think about what is the policy going to look like, but what does this really all mean? What is the culture? What is the plant? What is it? One question was how much water capacity does a bud hold, whether it's wet, when it's dry? So they're actually trying to drill down to understand this. So I find that incredibly encouraging. And then they are asking, so it was funny because I got the call at first and they wanted to dive right into the questions. And I said, well, first let's talk about what is it that you're trying to achieve? And I know this is a philosophical discussion, but if you can't tell me exactly what it is that you're trying to do, you say that you want to eliminate the black market. Well, these restrictive regulations isn't going to cut it. That's not what's going to happen. So let's look at this realistically. And I know some people hate that reasonableness term, but it really is like, let's be realistic when we're looking at this. Let's not try to overimpose. We know they're going to do a lot, and we know they're going to come out more restrictive, and then they'll have to loosen it up. But they are asking the right questions. They're asking things like, what would an outdoor grow look like? It's silly, but what would the perimeter fencing look like? How high should it be? If we're allowed for different classes, should those classes be allowed in one location, or should they be separated by 1,000 meters from each other, which is crazy. So after our first philosophical...
Or should it be in an industrial area or an agricultural area? Yeah.
So I do find that federally they are, and I find that the task force really made a good effort to try and engage the industry, try and find out. Members of the task force did a dispensary tour. I've had members of government tour, I know myself, and taken them to, and they've gone to other tours of production facilities. So it's, I think, one of the big things, and I think everyone here will say, it's one thing to call it advocacy, but really it's education. It's educating the public, it's educating your friends, it's educating government, politicians, and the policy writers.
Alex, other provinces have already been announcing their plans for legalization. Some have already closed deals with licensed producers for supply. While here in BC, a province known for a thriving cannabis industry, we've been pretty quiet on the issue. We know that the previous Liberals were at least quietly in support of Vancouver and Victoria's distribution model, but they did nothing to include supply in the regulations. With the dramatic turn in our last election, when the Liberals are no longer ruling BC and we have a coalition of the NDP and the Greens, what are some of the issues hampering the province's ability to come up with regulations or to come up with any kind of a clear plan at this point?
Sure. Well, definitely BC currently is, as we all probably know, lagging other provinces, specifically in their consultation processes. BC is only really starting now to begin that process. We haven't done our online public consultations, whereas most other of the major provinces have. And there's a couple reasons for that. Obviously, most of the provinces were waiting on the task force recommendations, and then once those came out, BC really hit the election. And ultimately, during the election, neither of the major political parties wanted to talk about cannabis. It was not an issue that was a priority for a number of reasons. I mean, you can dig deep into that and talk about strategic ridings with key demographic groups that were very hesitant about the cannabis issue. And the reality is that political parties were not going to talk about it unless they were forced into it. And really, it was up to industry to really drive that message. And because that didn't happen, ultimately neither of the political parties really had to stake out a concrete issue on where they stood on major issues like retail and distribution. So ultimately, we don't even have anything to hold the current government to account on. They didn't have to really commit to anything. Therefore, whatever they come up with is really up to them. In terms of, sorry, what was the second part of your question there?
Well, it was just, do you think they're going to do anything to protect the existing industry here in BC?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll talk a bit more broadly first about how receptive governments will be to the craft industry first, and then get into BC specifically. It's going to be a tough slog for the craft industry when dealing with government. The reality is that there has been a successful narrative that has tied craft producers, dispensaries with organized crime. Whether that's true or not, it's really immaterial because that has been a successful narrative that's been in the public consciousness. And no politician is going to want to be seen to legitimize an industry that's associated with crime. It's just an easy wedge to hand your political opponents. Specifically in BC, though, I think it's not necessarily that dire. There's some unique aspects about BC right now that I think could potentially protect the craft industry. First, you have, obviously, as you said, a really unique result coming out of the election with the minority government. Essentially, neither of the major political parties were able to establish a majority. The Green Party was set up as essentially power brokers that were able to determine who was going to form government. They decided to side with the NDP, and essentially the NDP needs buy-in from the Green Party on any legislation that they put forward in the House. The Green Party has said openly that they are supportive of the craft industry. That is a massive advantage for the craft industry, and as much advocating and lobbying that has to be done to the government, the same effort has to be going into having conversations with the Green Party. I'd say that's really a saving grace for them, as well as and the Liberals as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and the NDP. I mean, this is one of the interesting things to me about this issue with our current coalition is we've got the Green Party that, as you said, has been very supportive of the craft industry in BC, and then you've got the NDP party that's usually very pro-union. I think we were not very likely to go the Ontario model, and now that the NDP are in, maybe we're a little bit more likely than we would have been before. Except for now, the Greens are in there too. So it's.
I would also say specifically on that. Obviously, the pro-union connections are well known, but the Green Party in BC already has shown that they're willing to push back specifically on those kinds of issues, on union issues. There was a lot of talk about union certification and card check. The NDP wanted to roll back the secret ballot that's currently required for union certification, and the Green Party said that was a non-starter for them. And I think they see those connections between the NDP and the unions as one where they're able to sort of differentiate. So that actually might be a potential possibility for independent retail in British Columbia.